Rey Rivera has big plans for his future. As a huge movie fan, he is determined to write a successful screenplay himself one day. But that never happens. Rey Rivera's death is so puzzling and mysterious that it could easily be the script for a thrilling thriller. A secret note he leaves behind ultimately leads to numerous unanswered questions. Did a secret group want him dead? Did he know so much that even the FBI and the police covered up his death? Or did he take his own life in order to break out of the Matrix? In today's video, we talk about the death of Rey Rivera, a case that is more mysterious than any other. Rey Omar Rivera was born on June 10, 1973, to Angel and Marie Rivera at an Air Force base in Madrid, where his father was stationed at the time. The family originally came from Puerto Rico and later moved to America. Rey has an older brother named Angel and a younger sister named Eleanor. Family is always Rey's top priority, and he does his best to support the people around him as much as possible. He grows up as a curious and cheerful child. After his father retires, the family moves to Winter Park, Florida. Rey has an excellent memory and learns everything about the topics that interest him. He is musical, plays baseball, and loves to swim. He is so good at water polo that he eventually makes it onto the U.S. Olympic water polo team. But 2 weeks before the competition, he is kicked off the team after an argument with his coach, something he regrets for the rest of his life. After graduating from high school, Rey works in various jobs, including as a Spanish and swimming teacher. However, his true passion is writing. He dreams of becoming a screenwriter and loves everything to do with movies. His greatest wish is to write a successful screenplay one day. Rey is a popular, funny, and polite person who has many friends. In 2000, he meets Allison Jones and they start dating. She shares his passion for writing and supports him as best she can in realizing his dream. Allison is athletic, has a good education, and loves her job as a sales manager at Sexy Hair Concepts. In 2004, Rey proposes to her. However, the couple does not know how to finance their wedding, as they do not have much money. Around the same time, Rey receives a job offer from his old friend Porter Stansberry. Rey has known Porter since high school, where they played on the same water polo team. Porter is now a successful financial expert with his own company. It is a subsidiary of Agora. Agora is a large network of more than 30 companies in the publishing and real estate industries. Rey has no idea about finance, but he is a good writer, which is why Porter is keen to have him on his team. He has often offered him a job, but Rey has always declined because he didn't want to move from California to Baltimore. But this time, Rey agrees. And so, in December 2004, he moves to the East Coast. At first, only Rey moves to Baltimore and lives at the Peabody Hotel for 3 months. During this time, he and Allison have a long-distance relationship. Rey does a good job and is soon given the opportunity to write his own regular newsletter. Eventually, he and Allison decide to move to Baltimore for 2 years and save money during that time. Allison, who is very successful in her job, can work from anywhere and therefore agrees. The two move into a large detached brick house, which they buy for $280,000. They quickly make friends in Baltimore. Rey's positive energy captivates people, and they quickly become relatively popular. Rey, however, does not get along well with his colleagues. He cannot cope with their mostly conservative nature, and so Porter remains his only friend at work. Rey doesn't particularly enjoy his job either, as he would much rather be writing screenplays. He also feels uncomfortable because he has no idea about finance and is afraid that someone could lose money because of a wrong financial tip from him. This often prevents him from sleeping well, so he stays up all night playing video games instead. However, since Allison moved in with him, he has been feeling a little better. She motivates him to pursue other activities that he enjoys. Soon after, Rey starts going to the Marina Academy's water polo tournaments every week. The coach likes him and asks if he would like to work as his assistant. Rey accepts the offer, and the job is a very good balance to his work at Porter's and helps him feel much better over the next few months. In 2005, Rey changes jobs and starts working as a freelancer for Agora and other companies. On November 5th, 2005, Rey and Allison get married on a beautiful beach in Puerto Rico. He later describes it as the best day of his life. In April 2006, they have saved enough money, so they put their house up for sale and plan to move back to California soon. But that was not to be. On May 16, 2006, Allison has to get up early because she's going on a business trip. Rey gets up with her, makes her breakfast, and puts her suitcase in the car. The two say goodbye, and Allison later recalls it as follows. "It was a wonderful morning. I told him how much I loved him, and he replied how grateful he was to be able to love me. At that moment, she has no idea that she will never see her husband again." In the evening, Allison calls Rey from her hotel to tell him about her day, but he doesn't answer. She is surprised, as Rey always answers her calls. At this time, Claudia, a colleague of Allison's, is staying in the Rivera's guest room because she has a few work appointments nearby. Allison calls Claudia and asks if she knows where Rey is. Claudia says that he recently left the house looking completely stressed, wearing only flip-flops and with a serious expression on his face. Shortly before that, at around 6:30 p.m., Rey received a phone call, according to Claudia. He only spoke briefly, and she doesn't know with whom. At the end of the call, he was very upset and ran out the door wearing only shorts, flip-flops, a t-shirt, and a black jacket, without telling her where he was going. A few minutes later, he came back briefly, as if he had forgotten something. Then he drove away in his car. Allison is worried, but hopes that he just has an important appointment at work and will contact her later. But that doesn't happen. The next day, Claudia calls Allison around 5:30 p.m. and tells her that Rey hasn't come home. He is still unavailable. His cell phone seems to be turned off. Allison then cuts short her business trip and drives home. On the way, she calls Rey's mother, who lives in Puerto Rico, and asks her if Rey has contacted her. But his entire family has not heard from him either. This is very unusual for Rey. Allison calls everyone she can think of who knows him, but no one has seen him or heard from him. Rey's brother is very worried and immediately boards a plane from Orlando to Baltimore. When Allison arrives home, Rey's car is not there, the house is untidy, the light in the study is still on, and there is an open can of soda on the table. It really seems as if Rey left the house in a hurry. He took nothing with him except his cell phone. His toothbrush and clothes are still there. As there is still no trace of Rey, Allison reports him missing to the police. Her colleague Claudia has to travel back to New York. But at the same time, Rey's mother, his siblings, and Allison's parents arrive, as they want to help search for him. When Porter learns of Rey's disappearance, he immediately travels from another city to help as well. The police, however, do not initiate an investigation at first. They assume that Rey will reappear soon, but that doesn't happen. He remains missing for several days and no one can reach him. His family turns to the news and asks people on the street for help. Porter offers a $1,000 reward for information and sends an email to all his company's employees asking them to help with the search. He writes that anyone with helpful contacts should contact the media. He also involves the press and helps call hospitals. But all this is unsuccessful. Rey's bank account remains untouched, and he does not use his credit card. For days, it seems as if Rey has vanished into thin air. On May 22nd, 6 days after his disappearance, Allison's parents search parking lots in the city and find Rey's car in a paid parking lot in a backyard in the city. They inform Allison and the police, who arrive shortly thereafter. The car is parked on St. Paul Street. There are several parking tickets on the windshield wipers, and since one of them is from the day of his disappearance, it can be assumed that the car has been there since then. There are no clues in the car itself. There is no blood in it, and Rey has left nothing else behind. The only thing that stands out is that the car was parked at a very sharp angle, as if he had parked quickly in a hurry. The police search the area around the parking lot but find nothing unusual. Next to the parking lot is the Belvedere Hotel, a very large and well-known hotel, which now consists mainly of condominiums. Rey's workplace is also only a few blocks away. The police and his friends talk to people in the hotel and nearby, but none of them have seen Rey in the last few days. At first, it seems as if the car they found will not help them in their search. On May 24th, 2 days after the car was found, 2 of Rey's friends and helpers stand on the roof of the parking garage next to the hotel to look around. They notice something. Between the parking garage and the hotel is a small building that is only a few meters high. They see a hole in the roof and orange flip-flops lying next to it, which they immediately recognize as Rey's. The hole in the roof can only be seen from the parking garage or the hotel. It looks as if someone fell from the higher roof of the hotel and landed there. The friends immediately alert the police. They contact the janitor, Gary Shivers, who has been working at the hotel for 20 years. They need him to unlock the door of the small, disused annex. Together, they go into the empty annex. Gary says that he still cannot get the image out of his head that revealed itself to him when he opened the door back then. As soon as they enter, there's a strong smell of decay, and there is a lot of blood on the wall. Rey's body lies on the floor, already badly decomposed due to the warm temperatures. In his pants pocket, they find a coin with a heart-shaped cutout, a gift from Allison. She had found it on a business trip and given it to him so that when he missed her, he could hold the coin in his hand and remember that she was always close by. He rarely leaves the house without the coin, which is why those around him suspect that Rey ran back into the house briefly after his hasty departure to retrieve it. When Allison is informed of Rey's death, she is devastated. She does not understand how this could have happened and hopes that the autopsy will provide some clarity. But that is not the case. At the time of his death, Rey Rivera is 32 years old. The autopsy reveals 24 broken ribs, several lacerations, numerous cuts, and a shattered skull. In addition, Rey's right leg is so badly broken that the bones are protruding from his body. It is believed that he fell from the roof of the hotel onto the roof of the annex. The Belvedere Hotel is an 80-meter-high complex. The disused annex where his body was found is located behind it and is much lower. However, the hole in the annex is just under 14 meters from the end of the hotel roof, which is why it is assumed that Rey would have landed much further forward if he had jumped or been pushed from there. Pushing him as the cause of death also seems rather unlikely, as the hole is very small, and it is therefore assumed that Rey must have landed vertically. This is a posture that is rather rare in the case of a fall caused by pushing. A jump from the roof of the parking garage can be ruled out, as the distance from there is even greater, and the parking garage is only 6 meters higher than the annex. A fall from this height would not be consistent with Rey's injuries. The police conclude that Rey must have jumped from the roof of the hotel after taking a running start. This is also the cause of death recorded in the final report. However, Detective Michael Byer considers this unrealistic. There are many obstacles on the roof of the hotel, such as chimneys and air conditioning units. This makes it impossible to take a long run-up. Rey was also wearing flip-flops, which are not suitable for running. Another theory is that he jumped from a ledge 2 stories below the roof of the Belvedere Hotel that runs around the building. From there, he would not have needed to take a running start. However, this would have required climbing through a window that is not easy to open. And to reach this window, one would have had to pass through one of the private apartments or offices. However, Rey did not know anyone who owned an apartment there, and none of the owners saw him on that floor. This quickly leads to the rather absurd theory that he was pushed out of a helicopter. The janitor, Gary, says he saw a helicopter nearby on the day Rey disappeared. But Detective Bayer considers this theory very illogical. Helicopters would not have been allowed to fly so low without permission, and no one else can confirm seeing a helicopter near the hotel. It is also strange that Rey's cell phone is lying next to the hole, still in perfect working order and without a scratch. This is actually impossible after a fall from this height. His glasses are also lying next to the hole, intact and undamaged. Only one of his flip-flops is slightly damaged. Some people therefore suspect that he did not fall with his cell phone and glasses, and that these were placed there afterwards. However, there is no evidence to support this. It is more likely that his body cushioned the fall and the objects were therefore not damaged. Rey's credit card and driver's license were found in his pants pocket. However, a money clip that he always carried with him is missing. It was a wedding gift from Allison and had his initials engraved on it. He always kept his credit card in the clip, which was found loose in his pants pocket instead. The clip was never found, not even in the Rivera's house or in Rey's car. It is possible that it was lost in the fall, but there is also a theory that it was stolen. Investigators are trying to find out what Rey was doing at the hotel by talking to residents and staff. But no one saw Rey, noticed him on the roof, or heard a fall or a bang. It's as if he was never there. None of those questioned remember him. The roof with the hole faces away from the street and can only be seen from the parking garage or hotel. It was probably dark when he fell, so no one noticed. The hotel's surveillance cameras are also checked, but Rey is not seen on them. There is also a camera on the roof, but it is broken. However, it is known that it has not been working for some time, so it can be ruled out that someone deliberately tampered with it before Rey's death. Some sources say that Allison watched the recordings with Gary, the janitor, after the tapes were returned by the police. There were recordings from the day before Rey's death and the days after, but the day of his disappearance was missing, as if the police had deleted that part of the recordings. However, this has never been officially confirmed. The case attracts a lot of attention in the United States and is covered intensively in the news for a week and a half until the official cause of death is announced. The police have concluded that Rey took his own life by jumping off the roof of the hotel. Rey's family cannot believe this. There was no suicide note, he was doing well, and he and Allison were planning to have children soon. Allison demands further investigation, but the police refuse. Allison is convinced that Rey was murdered, but the police do not take her seriously as a grieving widow. Allison does not give up and visits the medical examiner. According to her own statement, the doctor took her into her office, closed the door and said, "We know what you're up to and we won't let you do it." She told her that the fractures in Rey's legs were not consistent with the fall. And indeed, she marks the cause of death as unclear in the autopsy report. As a result, the case cannot be officially closed. Nevertheless, investigators continue to assume that Rey took his own life. When a mysterious note turns up, the case suddenly seems to take a completely different turn. In the days before his death, Rey seems to be nervous again and again. Once, he reacts very anxiously when Allison is approached by a man while running outside. 2 days before his disappearance, the alarm system in Rey and Allison's house goes off at 1 o'clock in the morning. Rey jumps up, runs down the stairs with a baseball bat, and Allison follows him. But there is no one to be seen, and even the police cannot find anyone and quickly dismiss the matter, saying that an animal could have triggered the alarm system. Allison reports that Rey was very frightened and nervous from then on. The following night, less than 24 hours before his disappearance, the alarm system goes off again at around 1 a.m. Once again, they are unable to find the cause. The two ignore the incident, and just a few hours later, Allison has to leave on her business trip. After his death, Allison searches Rey's office for clues and finds something strange behind his computer. There is a piece of paper stuck there, folded up very small. Since there are still cut-off scraps of it in the trash can, it can be assumed that it was attached there on the day of his disappearance or the day before. When Allison unfolds the note, she sees that it contains a lot of typed text in a very small font size. Some passages are publicly known and make Rey Rivera's death seem even stranger and more mysterious. The note reads, "Brothers and sisters, volcanoes are erupting all over the world right now. What a beautiful sight. Virtues junxit mors non separabit. What youth unites, death cannot separate. I would like to welcome those who accepted our invitation to join during the game. Without them, we would not have succeeded. I set out in search of the truth, but not just for its own sake. By undertaking this search for truth, I hoped, with the help of others, to become a person worthy and ready to receive it. I stand before you as a man who respects secrets. That is why I value them as secrets. That was a very well-played game. Congratulations to everyone who participated. Members of the council, please note that I will focus carefully on the traditional tasks. In light of these events, I will fulfill the usual requirements of this council within a reasonable time. This is followed by a jumble of different names of directors in well-known films. These include Wide Awake, The Game, The Village, The Others, Signs, Eyes Wide Shut, Matrix, Sixth Sense, and Fight Club. All these films have in common that they deal with conspiracy theories, secret groups, or parallel universes. This is followed by a list of 50 people Rey knew and listed by their full names. Preceding this is the sentence, "Together with me, these players should be made 5 years younger by the council." The list includes his siblings, parents, Allison, who is listed as Allison Jones even though she took Rey's name when they married, Allison's brother, her parents, many people who worked for Agora, and their wives and children. Porter's name is at the bottom of the list with the note, "If he didn't do it himself." Allison notices that some close relatives are not listed, but others whom Rey knew only casually are. There is a gap below this list, and then it says, "Brothers and sisters, in our country of achievements, many ideas have become new inventions since I started my game." This is followed by texts about technical ideas and inventions. Among other things, he mentions radio frequencies, digital music players, drives, computer systems, Sudoku, cloning technology, Wi-Fi, CDs, DVDs, Viagra, the internet, Bluetooth, emails, Xenex, and much more. The strange note raises many more questions. Experts from the FBI examine the letter to find out if it contains a secret code. They cannot find any evidence of this. When photos of the note end up on the internet, numerous amateur detectives begin to analyze its content. Some of them notice that the note has been cut to size, and that the shape of the note and the arrangement of the text passages suggests the word help. Allison searches the internet for the phrase, "Whom youth unites, death cannot separate," and discovers that it belongs to the Freemasons. The Freemasons are a group that recognize each other by secret symbols and rituals. Some publicly acknowledge their membership, while others do not. They see themselves as an ethical association that stands for tolerance and humanity, and is convinced that constant work on oneself leads to self-knowledge and humane behavior. It is estimated that there were between 2.5 and 5 million Freemasons in 2012. The group's meetings often take place in secret, but they are not officially considered a sect. Allison is very surprised. She did not know that Rey had anything to do with the Freemasons. But as she searches for more information in the weeks that follow, she discovers that Rey apparently had a keen interest in the group and had planned to make a film about the Freemasons. The weekend before his disappearance, Rey read The Builders, a study of the Freemasons. And on the day of his disappearance, he's said to have gone to a bookstore to buy Freemasons for Dummies. All of this suggests that Rey may have been working on a new screenplay for which he was doing intensive research. It is possible that the texts in his cryptic letter were just notes for this screenplay. However, this does not fit with the part in which he listed numerous names from his circle of acquaintances. And it doesn't make sense why he would hide these notes so carefully. A key element in solving the mystery behind Rey Rivera's death could be the phone call Rey received shortly before his disappearance. According to one source, this call can allegedly be traced back to Porter Stansberry's company. A former secretary claims that employees knew about the call but were forbidden to talk about it. Porter denies this and says that the call did not come from his company. Porter is also said to have hired lawyers immediately after Rey's disappearance to forbid his employees from talking to the police or anyone else. It is also said that he himself has not spoken to the police to this day. It is unclear why he would not assist the police in investigating the death of one of his best friends. Later, however, it emerges that the call to Rey was not actually made from Porter's company, but from Fells Point, a neighborhood in Baltimore. More information about Porter is also released later, which sheds new light on the case, but more on that in the next chapter. It is still unclear who called Rey before his disappearance. As Allison tries to find out more, she comes across the theory that Rey may have stumbled upon a secret Masonic lodge, and that the call may have been a warning. Perhaps someone wanted to let him know that he was in danger. Something strange happens to Allison when she tries to retrieve her late husband's computer from the evidence room. There she learns that weeks earlier, an unknown person had called and wanted to pick up the computer. The caller did not give his name, but became angry when he was told that he could not have the PC. He then called again to inquire about the status of the data storage device and wanted to know whether any data had been found or deleted. To this day, it remains unclear who the stranger was and what his intentions were. The police have since closed their investigation. They remain convinced that Rey took his own life. Allison still hopes that the investigation will be reopened one day, as she is convinced that her husband was murdered. She urges anyone with information about Rey's death to contact the police and emphasizes that some people surely know the truth but have chosen to remain silent. Over the years, several theories have emerged about what may have led to Rey's death. We will now take a closer look at a few of them. Most theories about Rey Rivera's death can be roughly divided into two categories: suicide or murder. Let's take a look at the pros and cons of these theories. It may indeed be as the police suspect. Depressive thoughts are not always obvious, and it could be that Rey took advantage of Allison's absence from the city to take his own life. He may have managed to get onto the roof of the Belvedere Hotel and jumped off from there. Although it seems almost impossible to get onto the roof of the hotel, this is not true. Allison claims that Rey was afraid of heights and would therefore never have gone onto the roof. But later it is discovered that the two had already been on the roof of the hotel twice to watch the sunset from there. Allison denies this and says that they had only been to the hotel bar once, but never to the roof. Journalist Makita Brotman, who herself lived in a condominium in the hotel for a time, has this to say about it. In 2006, the elevator was often unlocked. Many of the fire doors were not alarmed, the security cameras were no longer working, and the bartenders on the 13th floor constantly went up to the roof to smoke, so the access door to the roof usually remained unlocked. She is convinced that anyone could have easily accessed the roof. This is also supported by the fact that on the day of his disappearance, Rey visited a website that shows what time the sun sets in Baltimore. When he rushes out of the house, the website is still open on his computer. He may have received a phone call that evening that devastated him so much that he wanted to take his own life. Perhaps he watched the sunset from the hotel roof one last time and then jumped. The strange note found on Rey's computer contradicts this theory. It suggests that there may be more to his death than meets the eye. And there are various theories about that too. The unusual bone fractures on his leg, and the fact that the alarm system in his house was triggered by chance on the last 2 nights before his death, suggests that Rey Rivera was murdered. Perhaps someone called him and lured him to the Belvedere Hotel under a pretext. There are various theories about who could have murdered Rey Rivera. Some suspect that his friend and former boss, Porter Stansberry, is responsible for his death. To this day, rumors persist that the last call was made from his company, which is one of the main reasons for this theory. An investigator who believes Rey was murdered warns Allison that she could be in danger if she investigates the circles of the wealthy. There is evidence that Agora Financial, the company Rey and Porter Stansberry worked for, was already suspected of securities fraud in 2002. And indeed, in 2007, Porter was fined $1.5 million for fraud. Perhaps Rey wanted to confront Porter or even go to the police or the press with even more information. To prevent that, Porter may have pushed him off the roof. Rey's brother, on the other hand, suspects that Rey revealed something in one of the financial newsletters he wrote for Agora Financial that could cost investors a lot of money. Rey may have been on the trail of a conspiracy that no one was supposed to discover. He suspects that wealthy and influential people may even be involved in the case, including within the police force. They would have the money and the means to hire people to make his death look like suicide. Apart from this theory, there are also other explanations for his death. Another widespread theory is that Rey's death had something to do with the Freemasons. Before his death, he had been studying them intensively, and some believe that this interest may have been his undoing. His note may contain excerpts from a meeting of the organization that he secretly transcribed. In the note, Rey writes, "My primary residence is in northern Argentina." This applies to Bill Bonner, the founder of Agora, and fits in with some people's suspicion that he is a member of the Freemasons. If he had found out that Rey was secretly transcribing excerpts from his speech, he would definitely have had the money and the means to have Rey murdered in such a way that it could not be traced back to him. Porter Stansberry also says in a video that the lights are going out in various places in America. Some people think this sounds similar to Rey's first sentence in his note. Volcanoes are currently erupting all over the world. From this, these people conclude that Porter also has something to do with the Freemasons. However, some of these assumptions are very far-fetched. And the question arises as to whether Allison would not have noticed if Rey had been so intensely involved with the Freemasons, or perhaps even wanted to become a member himself. On the other hand, it is also possible that he did all his research solely for his screenplay and stumbled upon secret aspects of the Freemasons who did not want to risk him going public with his information. Some people even suspect that Rey Rivera was actually working as a secret agent and that his note was a secret code, with the FBI pretending not to see anything special in it. Personally, I don't find any of these theories particularly credible. Each of them leaves unanswered questions or seems too abstract or far-fetched. Finally, I would like to present another theory that I think is a little more realistic. Mikita Brotman, the author and journalist I mentioned earlier, theorizes that Rey suffered from psychosis. She wrote a book titled An Unexplained Death, the true story of a buddy at the Belvedere, in which she examines Rey Rivera's case in detail. She bases her findings on FBI and police records and documents. Since Mikita Brotman was living at the Belvedere Hotel at the time of Rey's death, she has a different perspective on the events. In her book, she writes that after analyzing Rey's note, the FBI concluded that the text was written by someone who may have been suffering from bipolar disorder or experiencing a psychotic episode. Psychosis can lead to paranoia and hallucinations. The FBI experts also write that they recognize a so-called flight of ideas in the note, which is typical of someone suffering from psychosis. According to their analysis, it is also entirely possible that those around him were unaware of this. In this particular case, it may be that the mental illness of the author of the letter could remain virtually undetected by family, friends, and colleagues. The films mentioned in the note show a certain pattern, as they all deal with topics such as conspiracy theories, secret societies, and parallel universes. The film The Game is particularly interesting because it is about a man who is led to believe that his life is falling apart. At the end of the film, he jumps from a tall building, falls through a glass roof, and survives because he lands on an air cushion. He learns that it was all just a game that everyone around him played so that he would learn to appreciate his life more. Rey writes in his note about a well-played game, which could be an indication that he suspects he is also caught up in a game. He may have jumped off the roof to break out of the game, as in the film. This would also fit with the fact that Rey had already been on the hotel roof twice with Allison to watch the sunset, and had most recently had the website open on his computer where the times of the sunsets can be found. Perhaps the phone call triggered something in Rey, so that he was subsequently convinced that he was in a game or had to end it. The police stated that no one saw anything on the night of Rey's death and no one heard a bang. However, Brotman writes in her book that she herself was never questioned by the police, nor were the people who lived on the same floor as her in the hotel. On the night of Rey's death, she was lying in bed with her husband reading at around 10 p.m. Suddenly, she heard a loud bang, so she immediately got up and looked out the window. According to her, the bang was so loud that the window shook. She thought there had been a car accident, but she couldn't see anything from the window. And since it remained quiet after that, she soon went back to sleep. It was only when she heard about Rey's death that she remembered the bang. Brotman is convinced that this was the moment Rey Rivera hit the canopy. She also analyzes the autopsy report, which mentions an unknown cause of death, and writes, "The coroner's autopsy report states that Rey Rivera's injuries are consistent with a fall from a great height and were caused by a fall from a 13-story building. There was no evidence of foul play or signs of a struggle. The classification undetermined is used liberally when the cause of death cannot be conclusively determined, even if the majority of the evidence points to a specific cause." And indeed, in 2006, 20% of all deaths in Baltimore were classified as undetermined, while murder, for example, was determined in only 13% of cases. The statement that the fractures to his shin bone are not consistent with a fall is also incorrect. The autopsy report clearly states that only his right lower leg was broken and that this type of injury is caused by a fall from a great height. Based on all this information, not only does Makita Brotman conclude that Rey Rivera must have taken his own life in a psychotic episode, but the police and the FBI also note this assumption in their final reports. Rey Rivera leaves his wife Allison with $90,000 in debt, which she has to pay off over 10 years. Allison is upset that she has to pay off the debt alone and receives no support from Porter's company. She tries to turn her story into a screenplay but is unsuccessful. However, she does manage to appear in an episode of the Netflix series Unsolved Mysteries. However, this episode contains a lot of misinformation and presents the case in a very one-sided manner. It suggests that Porter had something to do with Rey's death, even though there is no solid evidence to support this. For example, the episode claims that the mysterious phone call Rey received shortly before his disappearance was made from Porter's company. As mentioned above, this is not true, as the call actually came from the Fells Point neighborhood in Baltimore. Porter himself says, "All of our company employees who had worked with Rey were on the East Coast at a company conference in St. Michael's at the time the call was made. No one from my company was in town when Rey disappeared. The idea that we called him from our switchboard is ridiculous." The episode also states that Porter never spoke to the police and forbade his employees from talking about Rey's death. Porter himself says in an interview that this is all a lie. He is shocked and hurt by the accusations against him and by how Unsolved Mysteries has twisted the facts. He explains that he never imposed a news blackout on his employees, but simply forwarded all media inquiries to a spokesperson. On June 23, 2006, he answered all of the police's questions and was never contacted by them again. He emphasizes that he always encouraged his employees to talk to the police if they approached them. However, as the investigation was closed so quickly, this never happened. Porter was not in town at the time of the crime, so he can be ruled out as the perpetrator. Nevertheless, the accusations against him persist to this day, which is very upsetting for him. Porter also reports that Rey asked him one day if he was one of the leaders of the Freemasons. At the time, Porter thought it was a joke. However, he now believes that this indicates that Rey was actually suffering from psychosis. Allison also told him that she was concerned about Rey's mental health. He was often in a bad mood and hardly ever got out of bed. Allison herself says that she cannot remember such a conversation. However, she reports that on the Sunday before Rey's death, they were leaving church when Rey suddenly took out his cell phone and left a message on someone's voicemail saying that they should call him back and that he finally understood everything. It later turns out that Rey had called Porter. Porter says that he did not understand what Rey could have meant by this message. Strangely, he did not call him back or ask him what he meant by it. After his death, Rey's childhood friend Brett Hopman appeared on television and talked about a strange conversation he had with Rey. Rey first asked him how to become a member of the Freemasons. A week before his death, he then asked him if he himself was a member and talked about the movie Eyes Wide Shut. In the movie, the protagonist discovers a secret underground organization and falls into its clutches. Brett also says that Rey asked where his apartment was located. He wanted to know if it was on a high floor and if he could stay there alone. When he learned that Brett's apartment was indeed on the top floor of a tall building, he even asked him for the keys. Brett found Rey's behavior very strange and did not allow him to do so, as he was allegedly afraid that Rey might be a danger to himself. The question remains as to what could have triggered Rey's psychosis. One possibility could be the alarm system, which was triggered several times shortly before his death. He had already been anxious and agitated in the days leading up to this, but from that moment on, it increased significantly. Perhaps he really did contact someone from the Freemasons, and when that person called him, his psychosis was triggered. Or he understood it as a hint that he was actually in a game. That would also explain why the caller has never reported to the police to this day. Perhaps the person does not want to publicly admit to being a Freemason or simply wants to keep their identity secret. But it could also be that the person is fully aware of what happened to Rey. It may be the same person who called the evidence room and tried to get hold of Rey's computer. Perhaps there is some hidden information on it that could incriminate the person. Despite numerous theories and clues, the Rey Rivera case remains a great mystery. If he was suffering from psychosis, that would answer most of the questions. But the mysterious phone calls to Rey and in the evidence room still leave open the possibility that it could have been a crime. Or that Rey was at least intentionally driven to his death. Allison remains convinced that it was murder and hopes that the case will still be solved. She asks anyone with information about her husband's death to contact the police. Rey's great wish to become a successful screenwriter unfortunately never came true. Nevertheless, he will not be quickly forgotten. His mysterious death continues to preoccupy people to this day. And that brings us to the end of today's video. What do you think happened to Rey Rivera? Do you think he suffered from psychosis? And what could the strange phone calls have been about? I'm really looking forward to your comments and theories this time. And have you seen any of the films Rey wrote? Let me know. By the way, you'll also be supporting the channel because any interaction increases the likelihood that the video will be recommended to people who haven't subscribed to Insolito yet. Other than that, there's not much else to say. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao everyone.